the wealth reception ideas, and the financial strategies meeting or session is really all about, and working with you on the financial strategies meeting is really part of the whole wealth reception idea. Remember, there are a bunch of different places in our process where we're going to need to have your help. One of them we talked about at the last time was the preparatory meeting with new clients, and that's the first meeting they actually have with us, in which we're encouraging advisors to actually do with us at our office and conduct the meeting themselves, because we think that we're asking having clients answer questions that typically are not the questions that you get engaged with your clients when you're doing your own financial work, because you'll be talking to them about who their healthcare proxies are, who their powers of attorney are, who their successor trustees are, and all of those questions have to do with who their family is and a lot about what their personal situation is, which are things that you might not often talk to them about, and why they would pick these people. Actually, I just noticed that Peggy's been able to arrive.
There are 7 other callers on the call.
Okay, Peggy, it's good to see you. I've talked about the TAP a little bit already, but I wonder if you're able to make some comments yourself about what it was like to attend the TAP.
Sure. So you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. Well, Kelly and I are here together. I apologize for our difficulty getting on the call today. So about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, I went down to the meeting where my clients were going to attend, and it's a very impressive facility, and I got there a little bit early, and Frank had started, and sure enough, the door burst open, and this young couple come in, and the first thing I can say is they were immediately concerned about being, they were literally just a few moments late, but they were a little frazzled from being late, and then when they looked over and saw that I was there, a familiar face, you could tell they knew they were in the right place, and visibly relaxed, and that alone, I think, was worth being there. I jumped up, showed them where to get coffee, and so I think the fact that Frank had this meeting in this lovely facility, and it was very organized, that they felt very cared for, and so I think just the fact of them being relaxed and feeling cared for, they could see the fit between the way I try to take care of my clients here at Journey and the way that Frank and Christine and Alicia do the same at their end, was just a very nice bridge and kind of container for this very serious discussion for estate planning. And I guess those are my comments.
Okay, well, thanks. Did you have any reaction to how other people reacted to the session? Any comments on that?
Yeah, there were some areas for improvement, as you and I talked about, Frank, just with with just some small logistical things. From the funniest thing was some elderly people kept wandering in and out of the meeting, but Frank put a fix to that. But just the material, what my clients said at the end of the meeting, because it was so, it's a very serious topic, and Frank's delivery was a little more serious that night because I think he was working through some, felt a little rushed by the people at the facility, but all those things are worked out. And so I was just concerned, is this just going to be too heavy and they're going to go into avoidance mode? But the husband popped right up and said, "Ooh, I'm glad I know this. I appreciate how transparent it is," and they were signing up for the next session. So I'm concerned for them. They have young kids without a will or any estate planning whatsoever, any guardianship in place. So my number one concern is to make sure they are cared for in the event something terrible happens. So I want this done as soon as possible. So the process and the content, mission accomplished.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Peggy. That's great. Could you just mute your phone on the screen so that, or push the mute button because we're getting a lot of feedback when I talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just looking for where that button is.
Okay. No, I'm still hearing me.
No, I'm trying to find the mute button.
Well, I'm just gonna mute you until we get a little bit further down, so you can keep looking for your mute button. But you can dial *6, and that should mute you as well. Okay, so I was talking about the various different opportunities that we think we have and where we need your help. And we talked about the prep meeting at the last session. And oh, by the way, I did find that there are some people who did not get the link to the YouTube recording of the session. And so what I'm planning to do is just send it out to everybody who's in the list. So you'll be getting the link to this one and the link to the YouTube session for the prep meeting so that you'll be able to see them both in case you missed the last one. So the second opportunity is the financial strategy session. And just so you understand where that is, it's essentially a session that's part of our process, and it's where we're really talking about the funding decisions that we'll be making and any other financial issues that have come up during the process. It's part of our process, so it's initiated by us, and we're doing it because we want to make sure that their plans work. So, and remember that we've talked before about the financial strategy synchronizer, and we know that when clients are alive and well and when they're disabled, there are a lot of different financial products and services that they need. And so as part of the program and part of the process, we want to make sure that they've got the various different financial services and products that they need. So just as a review, here's what our process looks like. And the Truth About Estate Planning session that we just had is right here. And this, can everybody see my arrow? I just want to make sure that you can all see my arrow. Actually, I can just go ahead and mark it with a marker, can't I? Here's the highlighter. So here's the Truth About Estate Planning workshop right here. And what's supposed to happen after that, so that the clients prepare for the process, is that they're supposed to go to designing a plan that works that's online. That's the various different sessions. There's about 6 of them, about 10 or 15 minutes long each, so they can watch them whenever they want to and download them. The next session after that, of course, is the prep meeting, which we talked about the last time, and the initial interview, where we actually talk about, okay, what is the process going to look like for the clients? We talk about what the fees are. We actually sign service agreements with them at that point and go over all of the various different fees that they can anticipate, so it's completely transparent what they will be paying over time and up front and for estate settlement. The next main thing is the counseling and design session, and that's where we go through the design of their trust and all the various different things that we talk to them about. And then there's the counseling and review session, which is really the signing meeting. That's over here. Okay, I'm not very good at drawing these things, but I'm trying my best. So after they've signed their documents and everything's in place that way, we can now start the funding process. So that's when we have the financial strategy session. And we used to have the financial strategy session before the signing, and then we realized that it's easier for clients to visualize what they are actually funding, what we're talking about in the financial strategy session, once they have actually signed their documents and we've gone through them and showed them how the design is implemented through the documents. So the financial strategy session is right here, and that's a couple of hours, sometimes 3 hours, depending on the various different amount of things that we need to talk about, and that's followed by the funding process, which we work with advisors on, and ultimately the Empowered Legacy session, where we go over all of the things that they have and go over the maintenance program and all the various different things that we're going to be working with them on, just as a review. So the financial strategy session is right here. And so I would like to comment on, just so that everybody knows, the way that clients actually get into the process is that they ask us to contact them the next day, and that's part of the evaluation form that Christine talks about at the beginning and also at the end of the workshop. When Christine gives it, I'll be talking about it at the beginning and the end, so she's actually giving the workshop. We thought we were going to actually talk about it during the break in the middle, but then discovered that we were moving along, so we've sort of decided that maybe we're not going to have a break in the middle. We needed to move it along, and it's nice to just continue the whole thing and continue the discussion without a break in the middle. If it were actually, 3 hours long, we probably would have a break in the middle, but this is really only an hour and a half or so, and people are fine with that. So when we're talking to them in the session, there are various different keys to effective estate plans, 2 of which are personalized counseling and the proper asset ownership. And of course, proper asset ownership is part of what we're talking about in the financial strategy session. But also we're talking to them about collaboration during the TAP, and you've all seen the pyramid we have, but the important part of that is during the, we talk about how a lot of times our main focus is preserving wealth right here, but and we don't really talk about expanding wealth that much, or we don't deal with expanding wealth that much ourselves. But of course, our clients are very happy to hear and listen if people have something to recommend so they can expand their wealth, and so that's the next rung up the ladder. And although financial advisors also work in the preserve wealth area, they work much more than we do in the expand wealth area. So we talk to them during the Truth About Estate Planning about how we're going to actually integrate with financial advisors and why it's necessary for them in order to have a plan that works. So, and then of course we talk about their personal planning goals, which, particularly the school bus story, which comes under creditor protection and some other things, invites them, or at least gives them the advantages about why it's important to have long-term trusts. And then that, of course, means that they need to maintain them, and often their beneficiaries are going to need to have financial assistance, et cetera, or financial advice from advisors, insurance people, et cetera. So that's why, I thought it was important just to mention that, that's all part of the whole picture of why we need to integrate with advisors. So again, we get to we go through the counseling and review session, and then we get to the financial strategies. Now, here's kind of a key part of it, and I want to talk about this with you and get some comments from you if I can. Part of when we're talking about when we're having this counseling and design session right here, one of the things that we're looking for in particular is what we call spots on the X-ray. We actually start looking at things up here in the prep meeting because there are a lot of questions in our personal information form, confidential information form, that call for issues like, okay, who are your advisors? And of course we know that they're with you because sometimes they'll even ask that they have their prep meeting with their financial advisor who referred them. But sometimes they come from other sources, and we find that they might not have the advisors that ultimately we determine that they need. But at least we get an inventory in the prep meeting. And then often I will talk to them about who they have and why they have them, and should we involve them in the process. And they'll tell us what they think about their advisors and that kind of thing. Of course, we're always going to be reinforcing to the people who referred them, and I've never had anybody who was referred by an advisor that complained about them, but oftentimes we find that there are holes in their team, and so we're looking for that up front. And then when we start the counseling and design, we oftentimes have people come to us with 3 and sometimes more issues that they're trying to resolve. So at the beginning of it, we'll go through what their goals are. But oftentimes during the discussion, we'll find there are things like that we sometimes call hidden waterfalls. I may have mentioned this to some of you before, but the metaphor there is if you're taking a canoe trip and you're guiding a canoe trip of a bunch of canoes down a river, and it's really peaceful and the leaves are turning and it's a beautiful day and all that, but you know that around the corner there is a waterfall that everybody will end up boating over if they're not careful. So what you want to do is you want to warn them about this risk that they're not aware of, and that's a hidden waterfall. So a lot of times when we're having these discussions, we'll come up with, when we're talking about goals, hidden waterfalls, things that they may not have been aware of that we need to talk about. Also, they're oftentimes talking to their financial advisor about various different financial issues that they're trying to resolve, and even sometimes they're referred to us because they can't be resolved until they've worked with us. For example, with insurance, trust, etc. So we're, of course, aware of the things that the financial advisor that referred them to us has been talking to them about, because in the interim between these meetings, we're talking about them, and they've given us permission to talk about their needs and that kind of thing. So we're going through what I call, a list of shadows on the X-ray during this session, and sometimes even during the signing session over here. But that discussion, the spots on the X-ray that we're looking at over here and up here, and also when we're having discussions with the advisors in the interim between the meetings, those are the things that are actually the main focus of the financial strategy session down here. Once we finish dealing with the funding issue. So let's just talk a little bit about what those issues might be that we're looking for in the financial strategy session. Excuse me, I've got to change back to the correct point here. All right, so spots on the X-rays. I've already talked a little bit about the missing advisor problem, and we often talk to them in terms of if one of the members of the couple, or if it's a husband and wife, is a do-it-yourselfer and they like to do a particular type of thing like investments, we remind them that if something happens to them, they become disabled, or if unfortunately they die, or when they die, I suppose I should say, there's an empty chair. And so sometimes it's important for them to have advisors who can fill the empty chair that they're willing to work with and that understand who they are and what their needs are. So that's one of the reasons that we talk about missing advisors, so that we can make sure they have the team members that they need. Sometimes we're talking to them about their insurance. Now, we're really not in a position of talking to them about the specifics of how much insurance they need for their survivors, but it's pretty clear sometimes that it's a need. If they have, a house and small children and not a lot of investments, or even if they have investments, they know what they live on, and so we talk to them, well, how much do you think would be necessary for you to have in order to continue that lifestyle? And that kind of gets them thinking along those lines, and we encourage them to talk in more detail with people who are talking to them about insurance. Of course, oftentimes before we get to the financial strategy session, we have estimated what their estate taxes might be, and if it turns out that they have a cash need to pay estate taxes, or at least to compensate for estate taxes taken out of the assets that are in the estate, we're talking about an insurance trust. And so it's important for us to make sure that the clients understand their need for insurance, that we've recognized the risk that their assets will be deleted because of estate tax. And so, that's one of the various different issues that we might talk about. Another issue that might come up in our counseling is the business succession plan issue. So if we're talking to a business owner or someone who's a partner in a business ownership arrangement, obviously one of the first things that we're going to be discussing with them in terms of their financial needs is what's their business succession plan. And we need to talk about that in terms of their revocable living trust, because if they own stock that's subject to a shareholder agreement, we need to have a copy of the shareholder agreement so we don't violate it when we transfer the stock to their revocable living trust, and we make sure that we get the appropriate consents. So, that's all part of what our planning is. But if they do have a small business that's an operating business, that's their main livelihood, for example, we might suggest that they have an extra session, which is what we call the business blueprint, business owner's blueprint, so that we can talk to them about the business succession issues if they haven't really addressed them. And of course, we'd want the advisors there to, as a team, to work on how we would approach the business succession issues. A lot of times we talk to clients about, do they have an investment policy? Because we're, right up front, we're talking to them about what their assets are. We're collecting those assets, and we'll be talking to them in the financial strategies meeting about their brokerage accounts and how we're going to title them. But in the course of the various different meetings, and often we'll talk to them about, well, let's say that you were disabled and your successor trustees take over. Are they prepared? How well are they prepared to conduct your investment policy the way you would want them to do that? And so we encourage them to have an investment policy statement, at least as a safe harbor, so they can say, look, Mr. Successor Trustees, during my disability, if you follow this policy, nobody's going to criticize you for having done so. Of course, the trustees have the ultimate discretion to decide whether to follow it or not, but at least they can have an investment policy safe harbor that the trust maker has said, look, if I come back after being disabled, or if I subsequently die, beneficiaries of the trust and successor trustees under the terms of this trust can't criticize you for having followed the investment policy that I set. Of course, again, the trustees have their own, have the discretion to vary from it, but if we have a safe harbor for them, at least they know, particularly if they're not sophisticated investors, what the trust maker's intent was. And of course, again, there are a lot of other types of hidden waterfalls that might come up, and we have to deal with whatever comes along. And so that raises another issue, which is we're not, supermen or super people, and sometimes there are hidden waterfalls and things that we're not aware of that a client might have, and so we're depending on the advisors that refer them to tell us what those might be so that we can pay attention to them and deal with them as we need to, and reinforce what the client's needs are in the discussion. But also, in general, we're not always sure that we have every spot that could be there on the x-ray, so we're looking for recommendations from the advisors as to what other kinds of things should in general we be looking for, so that we can be sure to include them in our checklist as we go along in the process. So let me talk to you a little bit about how the financial strategies meeting actually goes. So here we are. It's a 2 or 3 hour session, but often if we're not having talking about anything but funding, it might be just 2 hours or less. And the so what happens is after we've had the prep meeting, we start gathering the financial information about the client's assets. A lot of times they'll come to the prep meeting not realizing that they need to bring certain information that we need for funding to retitle their assets once we've made those decisions. So from the preparatory meeting up here all the way down to here, we're checking to see whether they've given us all the information that we need. So there's a couple of opportunities before we actually get to the financial strategies meeting to make sure we have everything that we need to talk to them about funding. So Once we have that information, we prepare our recommendations for how things are supposed to be titled, and we prepare a table of all of their assets with our recommendations about who should own them. Part of that discussion has to do with how we're going to actually equalize the assets. Let me just, I'm going to give you a, there's an agenda for the meeting that I have up here. Here it is. So we talked to them with that table about the proposed allocation and ownership of their assets. Let me go through each asset, discuss the ins and outs, and get their agreement or change our recommendations as to how it should be done. Of course, during that, we're reviewing equalization of the assets for estate tax purposes, if it's applicable. We finalize the table during that meeting, and we have them sign an authorization for us to actually start the funding process and retitling process in accordance with those recommendations. And that's the source of the funding forum and the funding process that we start thereafter. So, but we're also not just talking about how they own their assets, but other financial issues that we've been talking about from the spots on the X-ray and during the course of our advising and collaborating with the advisors. So then, of course, it's important to talk about any financial concerns. So it's extremely important, if there are such concerns, even if they're, and sometimes even if they're not, for the financial advisors that they're working with to attend the financial strategy session so that everybody's on the same page, for example, in terms of how retirement plans are going to be designated for beneficiary purposes. And continuing along with how we're going to be doing the funding, but also then we might start talking about other issues. In the interim between the meetings, oftentimes we'll be talking to the advisors about various different issues that we may have talked to the clients about that they'd like recommendations on. So when they come to the financial strategies meeting, sometimes it's time to try on some shoes, for example. So if we think that they might be helped by having a charitable remainder trust that has specific purposes, then we'll talk to them about that as a strategy at that point. We don't actually design what they're going to do, but we'll talk to them in general terms about how it would work for them, why it might work for them, and then they can tell us whether they're interested in proceeding on a process to do that. Of course, if there's insurance issues and there's a need for an insurance trust, that would be the time that we would talk about it and how that might be designed. A lot of times, if we're in the middle of their base planning process, the design of their insurance trust is going to look almost exactly the same after death as their revocable living trust, depending on who's insured. So, it makes a lot of sense to talk to them about how insurance trusts work and whether it's feasible to have one and the underwriting issues that might be present. And we might even have determined at that point how many what kind of insurance and whether it's feasible and what the premium might be so that we can coordinate all of the process to do that. So, we'll be talking about advanced planning strategies and anything else that might be of use for the client because, of course, we want to make their plan work. And that's one that meets their expectations. So that's oftentimes is the time when we might branch off into a separate process to do an advanced planning strategy or an insurance trust or something like that, or even to have the business owner's blueprint start there. So, that's what the financial strategies meeting is really about. It's about doing the titling of their assets, which leads us to a discussion of other financial issues. And so it's often very important for the financial advisors whose, services are relevant to the issues that we're discussing, they should attend. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of the financial strategies meeting. It's important to realize that it's really a collaborative. We don't really get there without having clients having expectation that they're going to be having those discussions unless we've been prepared for it and talked to them about it beforehand, which of course is one of the reasons for having the collaboration to begin with, so that we can share the information, we share the same language, and the client is confident that we're working together for them. So, you know, as an example of that, Peggy's clients that attended, you know, they know that we're working together. They'll feel a lot more confident with the process, knowing that Peggy's aware of it and Peggy's participating in it. And of course, if you're referring clients or we're working on clients that we've referred to you, and they've gotten to know you, then they're going to be a lot more confident that they're being well cared for if they know the people who are on their team and that they're working on, rather than just having a referral that they have to carry out themselves. So what I wanted to do was to see if we could, if anybody has questions and would like to discuss any of these things, and just go forward, you know, if anybody has any questions or suggestions about, you know, how we might go about this, or other spots on the X-ray that we might discuss with clients, it'd be really good to go over those now. So I'm going to unmute Peggy because I had her muted the whole time. So Peggy, feel free to break in now. But if you do, would you mind picking up and not being on the speaker, because I'm still getting the background.
Okay.
So does anybody have any questions or comments or suggestions?
I just have a question, Frank, and I apologize that next time I'll absolutely dial in. I didn't realize that it automatically would resort to this. I thought it would just be quiet unless I did something. The one thing, when I add up all the hours on the Navigator, it's 17 hours of meetings, and you know, clearly I can't, and I'm sure nobody on the call can do their job and also then for the estate planning process be available for an additional 17 hours of meetings by the client's side. So if there's any way, you know, with your deep experience, that you could look at maybe which meetings would yield the greatest benefit and where the handoff points are, so we can leverage all of our time more effectively to get the benefits, but without, you know, having an investment of 17 hours. Because that's kind of, I don't think I could make a living if I needed to do that for every client plan. So just on that would be great.
Well, let me just, if you could, I'm going to, just in response, I'm going to mute your thing so I can hear myself. But no, actually, there's only, the only real meeting that would be important for financial advisors to attend if there are financial advice issues, if there are things to talk about, would be the financial strategy session. I will tell you that many, many times the process continues on with full communication with the advisor, but the advisor never attends any of the meetings, and that's fine. I do recommend that if you have clients that are significant to you and they're going to TAP, that you attend with them, but it's not absolutely necessary. I know of some advisors, not working with us, but I know of some advisors with some other network attorneys who actually do take their clients to the meeting, drive them, and often do a lot of their business during that driving session. I don't know how they do that, but that's one of the things that they do. But I just recommend that you attend TAP. It's not something that I would say that you should do every time, or even could do every time. But there may be some clients that you want to emphasize your caring for them and go to TAP with them, or at least be there when they start, and then talk to them afterwards about how you'll talk to them the next day or whatever about what their reactions were. The prep meeting, of course, is not absolutely necessary. That's generally conducted by Alicia, and that's to prepare for the process. We do recommend that, you know, some advisors may want to conduct a preparatory meeting themselves, because it does give you the opportunity to talk about topics that wouldn't normally be in your process. But again, that's completely optional. I would generally not have you attend unless you wanted to, or the client wanted you to, the initial interview. And remember that the most important conversation that happens about you is the one that happens when you're not there. So in particular, the counseling and design session and the counseling and review session, which is really where the signing occurs, it would absolutely not be necessary for you to be there unless you absolutely wanted to be. So it's really the financial strategy session that's, if it's relevant to your relationship to the client and we're working together to help the client through some financial issues, that would be the time when you would attend. I have had some financial advisors attend and actually sign up new clients at the financial strategies meeting. I've had others who have clients who are going through the process attend because they want to make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of beneficiary designations and other titling issues, because they don't, they want to be there when those recommendations are made so the client can turn to them and say, what do you think? But there's actually no meetings in the process that we have that are necessary for an advisor to be at. It's what we're doing is just giving you a platform of things that are options that you might take advantage of for one client or another, or in every case, it's up to you. So, when we do work collaboratively with everyone in terms of the funding process, which is the funding form there on the lower right hand. And Alicia is oftentimes working with investment officers' offices to make sure that we've got all the paperwork that we need for the client to sign. We fill it out for them. Sometimes the investment officers or investment advisors prepare the paperwork for us and attend the meeting just to make sure everything goes correctly and smoothly. It all depends on what your time frame is, what your needs are, and what the client's needs are, and what you want to do. But I want to make it really clear that we're not insisting that anybody attend any of these particular meetings as a requirement or anything else. You can, if you're confident that we can proceed with the process, and we hope you are, talk to them about going to Truth About Estate Planning, have them go, and then let us carry the process forward. And of course, you'll get reports from us at every stage, assuming that and the client will get authorization from the client for this. But you'll get reports from us at every stage about what happened and that the meetings occurred, if there's anything that's relevant to you, what the outcome was, and you may have a call from me to talk about particular issues during that period. But again, it's really not necessary for everybody to attend the meetings. So did that answer your question, Peggy?
Yeah, thanks. And I think while learning to be a good heritage design partner, investing time and really internalizing the process is valuable. It's just, rolling the camera forward, how would this play out with subsequent clients and scheduling. And so, Frank, on the Navigator, where it says the Truth About Estate Planning and Designing a Plan That Works, those are two different distinct meetings?
No.
Okay.
The Truth About Estate Planning is what that's what you attended.
Yes.
That's right here.
Mm-hmm.
Designing a Plan That Works is online.
Oh, thank you. I missed that. Okay.
Okay, so what the client needs to do, what we tell the client at the Truth About Estate Planning is that when they get to the counseling and design session, which is down here, we're going to be talking to them about a lot of technical issues that they're going to need a little bit of background on. Now, in the past, when I didn't do the education program that we do now, I would teach people the stories that we tell them, a school bus story, if it's relevant, the IRS supermarket story about estate taxes, etc. There's a bunch of stories. I would teach them those stories while we were having the counseling and design session. But what I found was that oftentimes later on, some new issue might come up for them that they don't know the story about, and they don't know it's something that we can fix. And so we would have clients who had a lot of spots on their education. So what we try to get the clients to do is to go to Designing a Plan That Works online, and at their leisure. They can do it Saturday night, or we'd want to do it Saturday night, but they can do it whenever they want. And it's invitable. It's in small mouthfuls. It's 10 to 15 minutes per session. There's only 6 of them. So they'll get all the stories there. They get all the technical issues. They'll understand what powers of attorney do. They'll understand what they need to know about probate and funding and beneficiary designations and what trustees do and how we design who the trustees are going to be and what their functions might be. There's a lot of different issues that it's very helpful for them to have a background. So they don't really need to see all of that until they begin their counseling and design session, which is often several weeks after TAP. So they have plenty of time to do it. And we've had clients say, you know, it really was very helpful to do that beforehand, and it helps them understand what we're talking about in terms of the counseling. So when we start going through all the various different issues that they might have and the design template with them, there's a lot of, you know, we can remind them of the stories that they heard. They'll say, oh yes, now I remember that. What's kind of interesting is it looks like a lot of time. And, you know, yes, it's an investment of time and energy for any client to go through our process. We think it's necessary to do that in order for the plan to work. In other words, meet their expectations. But I've often had a lot of, particularly business people, well, I can't say often, but I've had some business people who've gone through the process. In particular, I've had a couple of engineers who've gone through the process. And up here at the initial interview, they're saying, you know, I can't imagine what we'd have to talk about for 3 hours in counseling, or why this meeting would take so long, because of their understanding, their background of, you know, I spend a half an hour with an attorney, tell them what I want, and then they do the documents. We come in for a half an hour and we sign them. But they don't really understand exactly all the various different things that we need to deal with. However, by the time they get down to the meeting where we start their funding, and we ask them, we'll ask them several questions about the process. One of them is, you know, what did we do right? What could we improve? And, you know, what would you say to other people about our process? How would you describe us? And they'll often tell us that, you know, at the beginning of this process, I really had no idea why we would be spending so much time. And now I can't believe how much we've accomplished, and I'm so grateful that we did spend the time. So, you know, a lot of times people don't know the value of spending the time to actually address the issues until they actually do it. And a lot of that sometimes that's really what we're talking about in right up here at the beginning in the TAP, and the value of counseling and why that's important. So yes, it is a lot of time, Peggy, and lots of people have said that, and I understand that. But that's the kind of thing that we need to do to make plans work. And, you know, we're just a choice for a client. They don't have to choose us, but this is how we think things should be done. So, any other questions?
Just a comment on the time it takes. It's very similar to the process we use to go through our clients' work, and we tell them that at the end they won't get a binder, you know, with a bunch of charts and graphs, but they'll actually have thought through how they want to live, and that it's, you know, it's the quality of the conversations along the way that matter much more than the numbers on the page, because 2 minutes after they leave, the numbers on the page will be different. But so I understand it. So thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? You know, it's kind of interesting. There's one aspect of having an online meeting with people is, particularly if you're presenting it this way, is it's really hard to see whether there's any feedback originating with people, or how long to pause while you're asking for people to come up with questions. So one of the reasons for unmuting yourself is to be able to break in and sort of interrupt. But, you know, we're sort of working out how does that work in terms of feedback, and people asking questions. So if the time that I've left for answering questions is too short, please feel free to call me anytime and talk to me individually. I'm very happy to talk to you about anything we cover today. So anyway, thank you all very much for attending. This has been helpful. At least I hope it's been helpful. It's always helpful to me to review things and have some feedback. And I look forward to talking to you in February. I'm sorry, in January. Just remember, next December 3rd is the next Truth About Estate Planning workshop. People should call Peggy if they'd like to have a client that's going to register for it. We'll confirm the registration. Look forward to seeing them there. We'll give them directions to the site and all that. And the next fourth Tuesday is going to be in January. So we'll keep you up to date with these things, and we'll be sending you links to the talks, and look forward to seeing you. And if we don't talk to you, have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday and a great season at the end of the year, and Happy New Year, and look forward to working with you next year. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Bye-bye.